Hey, fellow Injustice players.
Quit embarrassing yourself.
They're adding the Atom to the game. He's looking cool. Fine, I guess we'll talk about Hellboy then.
Thanks for the light, pal. This just got a whole lot more interesting.
I've still got a small advantage.
At last, NetherRealm Studios recently unveiled some gameplay footage of what hopefully isn't the sole guest character for Injustice 2.
Hellboy is looking great.
Whatever you got, I've seen worse.
Hellboy was created by celebrated comic artist Mike Mignola as a governmentally enforced paranormal investigator with demonic origins and abilities. While working with other supernatural individuals in their efforts to protect the United States from dangerous creatures, artifacts, and forces, Hellboy is generally a chill guy under the gruff exterior, having been raised by a human parental figure and wrestled with his dark heritage. The horror and pulp adventure-inspired character in comics have garnered praise over the years, and there have been many adaptations to other forms of media, the most notable being a series of live-action films directed by spook enthusiast Guillermo del Toro. A fun fact about me is that I used to have a professor in college that would gush about Hellboy and Magnolia's work. That and Swamp Thing and Howard the Duck. Perhaps the holy trinity of weird comic book characters. I don't know how Doctor Strange would fit in there. Anyway, while the character has a few video games under his belt, he was one of the examples teased by Injustice 2 game lead and industry veteran Ed Boon via social media to be featured as guest DLC in the game. Characters outside of the typical Mortal Kombat and DC Comics mold proved popular in Mortal Kombat 9 and Mortal Kombat X, with figures such as Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy Krueger, Friday the 13th's Jason Voorhees, and the title creature from the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Predator offered as supplemental online content for both games. A few months after the launch of Injustice 2, Hellboy was revealed alongside Aquaman villain Black Manta and Mortal Kombat's own Thunder God, Raiden, as the next wave of DLC content for the title. Taking a look at Hellboy's moveset, I do think he's pretty nifty to play as, despite him not being as stylish as other characters in the game. I like that he fights like a big guy with a stone arm, a gun, and a bunch of creepy horror ephemera. While he is seen juggling combos and laying the satanic smackdown on his opponents, he also seems to be doing some spells like summoning plant foliage, unleashing a water attack, and activating some sort of devil trigger mode. One thing that did bug me during the first time we saw him in the game was that I felt he looked too much like his comic version. It's not strictly from a character design perspective, but in that they kept some qualities of Magnolia's stylized illustrative work, notably the character's proportions and the face. I mean, just look at that jaw. But since he's really a guest to the game and not something deeply tied to the game's story or anything like that, it's no big deal to me. It's a crossover just like the anime-esque looking characters like Tron Bonne and Zero from the Mega Man series appearing in Marvel vs. Capcom. But art style didn't stop Capcom from putting characters in infinite story necessarily. Also, one thing people have noticed is that Hellboy's arm keeps going back and forth between sides when you look at this gameplay footage. I don't know if any character in the game has this similar thing happen to them, be it part of a character or just a tool or weapon that they have. Most of the character models in Injustice 2 seem to be symmetrical. This Hellboy example reminds me of Spencer's bionic arm in Marvel 3 and how it would switch sides depending on what way the character was facing. In video games, you have to sacrifice logic like that in order to make a functional and enjoyable game, but it's not really a big deal. I think many people are anticipating that Hellboy isn't going to be the only non-MK guest character in the game, myself included. Spawn of Image Comics fame has also been teased and is a likely choice given that Spawn creator Todd McFarlane is planning a major resurgence of the character specifically in film. Characters like the Terminator have also been discussed, but while I feel that characters like Hellboy and Spawn fit the game's superhero comic book aesthetic a bit better, I really wouldn't be against it. If NetherRealm wants to use a character that would fit into one of their games but for whatever reason can't perform the moves warranted in a Mortal Kombat title, just put them in Injustice. Jason Voorhees, the Predator, etc. worked for Mortal Kombat because they are either psychotic murderers or super powerful hunters. If all parties are okay for them being in a DC Comics fighting game, feel free to do it. Well, I've got to read some Hellboy in the future, but this fighter seems to be a hell of a good time. End me. He was one of the examples teased by Injustice 2 game lead and industry veteran Ed Boon, Blay! It's a Halloween episode!